in Ruth, you have Boaz, and Naomi. Boaz and Naomi are both Jews from the tribe of Judah, whereas Ruth is a Moabitess from the country of, or area called Moab. And in Joshua chapter 24, there is a wonderful summary of this whole thing that we've been through, and I wanted to read through this to just give a summary, and it catches up Mara and Catherine with what we have studied so far. And then we'll go on with today's lesson, and then we'll review last week's lesson, and then go to today's lesson. Okay, so you can just sit back and get comfortable this time, because I'm just going to read this to you, as much of Joshua as pertains to us. Okay. Then Joshua assembled all the tribes of Israel at Shechem. This is Joshua chapter 24. He summoned the elders, leaders, judges, and officials of Israel, and they presented themselves before God. Joshua said to all the people, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Long ago, your forefathers, including Terah, the father of Abraham and Nahor, lived beyond the river and worshipped other gods. But I took your father Abraham from the land beyond the river and led him throughout Canaan and gave him many descendants. I gave him Isaac, and to Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau. I assigned the hill country of Seir to Esau, but Jacob and his sons went down to Egypt. Then I sent Moses and Aaron, and I afflicted the Egyptians by what I did there, and I brought you out. When I brought your fathers out of Egypt, you came to the sea, and the Egyptians pursued them with chariots and horsemen as far as the Red Sea. But they cried to the Lord for help, and he put darkness between you and the Egyptians. He brought the sea over them and covered them. You saw with your own eyes what I did to the Egyptians. Then you lived in the desert for a long time. I brought you to the land of the Amorites who lived east of the Jordan. They fought against you, but I gave them into your hands. I destroyed them from before you, and you took possession of their land. When Balak, son of Zippor, the king of Moab, prepared to fight against Israel, he sent for Balaam, son of Beor, to put a curse on you. But I would not listen to Balaam, so he blessed you again and again, and I delivered you out of his hand. Then you crossed the Jordan and came to Jericho. The citizens of Jericho fought against you, as did also the Amorites, Perizzites, Canaanites, Hittites, Girgashites, Hivites, and Jebusites.
Hi, yikes.
Yes, all the ites. But I gave them into your hands. I sent the hornet ahead of you, which drove them out before you. Also the 2 Amorite kings. You did not do it with your own sword and bow, so I gave you a land on which you did not toil, and cities you did not build. And you live in them, and eat from vineyards and olive groves that you did not plant. Now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your forefathers worshipped beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your forefathers served beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord."
I love that.
Yes. So that is the whole history, and I love that it includes Terah all the way on down, including what we read in the book of Numbers about Balaam and Balak, and that whole history. So now we are in Ruth. And last week we studied the characteristics of Naomi. We're going to be studying, we read the whole book of Ruth first, And then we read and studied Naomi and her personality and characteristics that stood out to us. So now I want to go around the room and let each person just say one thing about Naomi that stood out to them in your chapter. We did chapter 1 while we were here, and then at home you did chapters 2, 3, and 4, things that stood out about Naomi to you. And
Do you want just chapter 2?
Just one's all we get.
Well, we can go around the room several times, one at a time, that way we don't get stuck on one person. And so we can start with chapter 2. If something stood out to you in chapter 2, Debbie, what did you see?
Oh, well,
Or if you didn't do it by chapter, then just go ahead and list things that stood out to you.
this week, the thing that stood out to me is it seems like she has a lot of wisdom, so she gives a lot of instruction, and Ruth goes to her and asks her opinion, and she seems like she gives really good advice. She knows, she's paying attention to Ruth coming back with the extra grain, and she's hearing her tale about how Boaz had been good to her and didn't want her in any other field. And she said, yeah, that's a good thing, what he did. And I think she understood the favor that he was showing her, and that, okay, this is a relative. So it was, good advice to tell her to go to him, and this is how you're going to do it, and he'll show you what to do. And so over and over, she's giving out instruction. In it, to me, there's wisdom in it. It's blessing.
All right. Okay, Lisa?
Well, in Ruth chapter 2, one of the things that really stood out to me was Boaz watched her, and he saw that she was faithful to Naomi. He saw that she took care of Naomi, and he saw that she wasn't afraid to work, and she was good to look at. So this was the beginning in chapter 2 that begins, and that's in another chapter, that begins the negotiation for her, because there's something involved. It's not just Ruth that's involved. It's the bloodline of the land. And that was one of the things that really stood out to me throughout all this, is the bloodline of the land, keeping the land where it belongs.
Okay, all right. John?
I'm cramming right now, but the thing that
Yeah.
it just kind of hit me here is that, and unless I read it wrong, she didn't fit. She was.
You're talking about Naomi didn't fit?
We're now on her.
We're
Right.
still just concentrating on Naomi.
Well, I blew that
So-
one then.
So Naomi is the
mother-in-law
The
of
mother.
Ruth.
no. Okay, I got that back. So it was. Naomi said to Ruth didn't belong because she was nicer, prettier, didn't fit there, and she was worried about being standing out, and she was looking out for her, her protection.
Okay, so Naomi was looking out for
She
Ruth's
was good at
protection
that.
because
Because
Ruth stood
She
out.
was really
Right.
good at that.
Okay, very good.
Wish
Yeah.
I had a mom that did that.
Yeah. Okay, Jeff, what stood out to you?
I kind of had two, but someone got there first.
Okay.
So the other one was interesting, because to me it was something that wasn't said, but was a part of the culture, of the idea that we Hebrews, we have one God, because of Abraham and what he told us, and told us about how he had a relationship with just one God.
Uh-huh.
But in Moab, they had a whole slew of gods. And so when you were in the Jewish lands and the Hebrew lands, they looked upon that as, that's like a dark place to be or to go, and it really isn't a good idea, because they had come through it and they had sort of been emancipated from it by Moses as he brought them up to where, and then Joshua took them on, like we read.
Uh-huh.
So I thought that was you hear a couple times, where it's real slight, but you hear a couple times in here where Naomi, feels really humbled. Like, you took me back. I went to the bad place.
I went to the bad
And she
place.
really felt God had kind of, things had happened that weren't good in her life, and that kind of God had let them happen, or that they happened because they they foretook the relationship with God which they had had. And as a young woman and growing up there, she should have had and stayed with. But instead, her husband said, "Oh, we got to go there because we're going to eat." And because, so another thing I saw a little thing on YouTube where they said that these archaeologists had found the tomb of Moses in Moab, and it clicked with me because I thought that's as far as he kind of went, to Mount Horeb and all that, and then
He wasn't allowed to
the
cross the
people
Jordan.
went on. So he kind of stayed in that rickety place, and then she had gone there, and it was still that sort of, this is not the good place to go. So she had been there. So it's like it said a couple times that she felt really humbled, and that she had not served God correctly as far as their culture was concerned. So she was really overjoyed to get to come back and to be a part of all that, and do like the heritage, because the heritage thing was really in their culture, to see that the land got passed on and the bloodlines and everything. So that's kind of what
Okay, all right. Robert?
Well, actually, at the end of chapter 1, and they're coming back to Bethlehem, there was a celebration. They knew they were coming back. And then in chapter 2 is where Boaz knew what Ruth was doing for Naomi, and how Naomi was taking care of, or Ruth was taking care of Naomi, and that Naomi blessed Ruth twice. I got through there. The first time was he said that it was okay for her to go behind
two
her
can't sit
Ruth. I guess she had to have permission back then. I don't know. And the other blessing she had was from Naomi was how much of a blessing that Boaz said, only stay in my field, because otherwise, obviously, she probably would have been like free for other people. So I think in chapter 2 is where, as far as Naomi, she knew that Boaz was going to redeem Ruth, and she was starting to set the groundwork for it.
Okay, all right, good. Now we'll go back around if anybody wants to add to what they said about Naomi. If you don't, it's okay. But if you want to add something to what you said about Naomi, then this is the time.
Is this for just chapter 2?
Any chapter of
'Cause-
the book of Ruth.
Yeah, one of the things that really stood out to me in chapter 3 was that Naomi began to see the need for Ruth to find security,
Okay,
because she knew that if she did not stay in that field, what was really going to happen to her? She was going to be choice meats for everybody. And so she begins to think, she's young, she's beautiful, she's humble, I got to find a man for her. And she knows Boaz is the one because it's the bloodline. And I found that to be so interesting, because she was desperate to do that, because not only did that take care of Ruth, but it took care of her. And because that was her field. And had Ruth gone to someone else, she could have lost that field. And so there was a lot at stake. It was her future, Ruth's future, and the lineage yet to come. So there was a lot at stake, and Naomi had to figure that out. So one of the things in 3 was that she had to find security for Ruth, and she knew it had to be in Boaz.
okay, all right. Anyone else?
Yeah, but also I got out of with Naomi is that she's now teaching Ruth on how a relationship or how courting would happen back then with Boaz. So Naomi is instructing her on how to approach Boaz. Obviously, he has to come approach you. I guess that's kind of what the tradition was, and she is. She knows that Boaz is going to secure, but she also knew there was somebody else that was ahead of Boaz, because obviously there must have been communication between them all from Moab to Bethlehem, because everybody seemed to know everything when they come back. I mean, why would there be a celebration? Basically, I'm so happy that they came back. Someone had to go
Oh,
ahead.
Jesus on the main line.
Yeah.
I mean,
So, and so Naomi is instructing in chapter 3 Ruth on what to do and how a proper relationship according. She's teaching them the how things are done with the redeeming of the land and all that. Reading.
I have a question, and I've never figured this out. Why would a single woman go lay at a man's feet?
I was just gonna ask that.
Well, yeah.
But
Why?
was
Where
that the
is that?
ritual?
Yeah, where
Oh,
is? I mean,
Well, yeah, see, yeah, that
I have
was really-
often wondered that. Why would she go lay at a man's feet and hide on the threshing floor and then be covered by him in the middle of the night?
Then have to leave before everybody got up.
Yeah, that I mean, in my mind, that's like I snuck out in the middle of the night and did something, had to be back home
The
before anybody
walk
caught
of
me.
shame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So why did she have to do that?
okay. The threshing floor was typically made of clay soil packed to a hard, smooth surface. Sheaves of grain were spread on the floor and trampled by oxen, often drawing crude wooden sleds with notched rims. A shovel and fan were used in winnowing the grain. Since robbers would sometimes visit the floor at threshing time, the laborers slept there. Threshing floors were often located on hills where the night winds could more easily blow away the chaff.
So are you saying
question?
it because she was a harvester that
Uh,
she could stay there and that was the safest
No.
place?
No.
No.
Okay.
I was
Um,
thinking that maybe she was there, from what you're reading, like to protect that land, which goes back to what you were saying about.
I don't know, I'm confused.
I thought it was like,
I'm just
You're-
being genuine
I
here.
thought culturally there was something in it that
Yes.
the
So
obvious.
why?
Yeah, so did I, but I
That's
wanted
like-
to know what it
Well,
was.
it's a
Okay.
marriage, it's sort of like, do you want me to be under your covering? Do you
Right.
want to
Oh,
receive
that's
me
really
into your
interesting.
family?
Right.
But it's like, but she's trying to also be appropriate with it, that's why she doesn't want
Right.
That doesn't make
see.
sense to me, cause it's
Okay.
like sneaking in the middle of the night.
But,
I mean,
see,
that's my brain.
in ancient Israelite society, the following well-defined legal obligations fell to the next of kin, known as the Goel, or kinsman redeemer. Redemption of property. Family lands could not be permanently sold, but out of family possession. A destitute relative could sell inheritance land to pay debtors, but landless people were effectively reduced to servitude. It fell to the Goel to redeem lands and family members by payment of outstanding debts. Where no Goel existed, the land could be sold outside the family, eventually reverting back in the Jubilee year. Levirate marriage. In the event of the death of a man without an heir, a surviving brother was obligated to redeem or marry the widow and raise up an heir for the deceased. This implied a financial and emotional commitment that not all brothers were willing to undertake. The Goel could seek legal exemption from the obligation, but such exemption was considered a dereliction of duty and involved considerable disgrace. I know I have read that in that culture, by laying at a man's feet and using that covering was a proposal of marriage.
Okay, that's
So
what I
she
kinda
was
thought it
proposing
going.
She
to
was
him?
proposing to
proposed to
him.
Okay, now, here's the thing is that she was told by Naomi to do this. Naomi knew that there was another kinsman redeemer that
Yes.
had first choice.
Yes,
And so Boaz was Naomi's choice.
right.
And so she had to do this. And then when the other kinsman redeemer realized that she was from Moab,
Uh-huh.
he gave her up because he didn't think she was clean enough for him.
Well, but
Yeah,
also,
But there was the
he did not
land.
mess, he didn't want to mess up his inheritance.
That's what I was saying.
Yes.
He didn't. Doesn't that have to do with the land?
It has to do with the land, because right there in, Elimelech says, I thought I should, okay, where is it? Then I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate.
Yeah.
You redeem it yourself, I cannot do it.
Was
It
that
didn't
because she
have
was
so
a
much-
Moabite?
No.
Okay.
No.
Did not have to do with the Moabites, it had to do with the lineage, and he could mess it up with his own descendants.
Ah.
Yeah, cause
Oh,
he might
I
be
can see
married.
that.
That's what you
I can-
just
I can
read.
see it
You
too.
just
I can
read
see
that.
that.
He already has
Yeah.
a wife.
God,
I thought it was the
when
outside.
they did the lots for the
Right.
Yes.
it would mess up everything.
Yes, exactly.
It's not
Whereas
hard to do.
Boaz did not
Boaz
have
is
any
not married.
It's not hard to
children,
do.
apparently,
Everything.
and didn't
No wife.
worry about it at all. And Ruth
Well,
was a
that
much
clears
younger
up
woman.
36 years of wondering.
Yes.
There you go.
Good, good.
Yeah.
Okay, and then of course, he waited until there was a group of 10, which made a legal proceeding in Israel, and so that worked out beautifully. So, any other question at the moment?
Well, I like
No,
the
you answered mine.
Well, I like
Okay.
the fact that he did this in the midst of council, so that nothing could be said,
like
nothing
that.
could
Exactly.
be, everything was done decently and in order.
Exactly.
Culture.
He wanted it above board, he wanted it noted, and had the 10 men to be the witnesses, so there would be no question about the lineage, about the land, that he's saying that he's buying it. He says there are two possible explanations for Boaz's terminology, that Naomi was selling the field. She may have owned the land, but been so poor that she had been forced to sell it. Though through Boaz, Naomi was appealing for a kinsman to purchase back the land and keep it in the family. It seems more likely that Naomi's husband had sold it to an unnamed third party before leaving for Moab. The land of a family or clan could not be sold permanently, so Naomi had the right to buy it back. Unable to do so, she transferred this right or obligation to her nearest kinsman. In this case, Naomi would have been selling the right of redemption.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So before they left, because of that famine, that land was sold to somebody. And in order to get it back, to make sure that it was in Naomi's lineage, then they had to have a kinsman redeemer or wait until the Jubilee.
Mm-hmm.
Once every 50 years, land reverted back to the original owners. But this was before the Jubilee, so they needed a kinsman redeemer to buy it, and that's why he said that.
Oh my goodness gracious.
There was a lot of legality
Yeah.
in all of these transactions.
It's amazing how everything is focused around land.
Yes.
And then yet we look at Israel now,
Uh-huh.
and I was saying this to Robert last night. It was either Robert or Karen, I can't remember who. But of all the people that has forced Israel to give up land for peace, how much land that Israel really had from God.
All the way to the Euphrates River and all the way to
And
the Nile.
look at how many leaders around the world have forced Israel to give up land for peace. Because it's all about land. One of the things that I learned when I was studying the kingdom, it's not about the people. It's about land. Kings only fight for land because if they fight for land, they automatically have all the people. So it's always about land. The more land, the more people. You see, they all become subject.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's so good.
And it's God's land to distribute where he wants to, and he had said is going to the line of Abraham, Isaac, and then Jacob and his descendants. And Esau, we saw from the map that he's got Mount Seir and on down, and I'll get you guys maps. And then Moab had their territory, and you have Ammon, the other one of Lot's sons, had another territory. God gives the right. He's the one who decides who should be where. And so out of all of those, you don't have a territory called Moab. You don't have a territory called Edom. You don't have a territory called Ammon. You have Israel. Israel is the one that is the steadfast, staying in place. It is there. It is a God-given right for eternity. God never says, I'm going to take the land from you. He said, when I have to discipline you, I'm kicking you out of the land.
Amen.
And he did, and they went to Babylon. But then after that period of 70 years, then they were allowed to come back. It was because of discipline. But the land was still theirs. And he kept a remnant of the poorest of the poor in the land.
To take care of the land.
Yes.
Yeah.
Land.
Yes.
You had
Land ho.
You had also commented about the fact that you had thought that when when Naomi's husband had taken the family out to go,
To Moab.
that the indicator what you said about he sold their land, and he even sold it to a third party, which is kind of, you know, and then and then he took them because they weren't coming back, I'll bet, in his mind.
Yeah, and he didn't come back.
And
He
yeah.
died.
Well, because that's
So
where the
that was
food was.
interesting
Yeah.
too.
You know,
That
they
was where
went to the
food
near
was.
they went to the nearest burger.
Yeah,
You know, fast food.
exactly.
You know?
Yeah,
That's
because
right.
see, when Naomi decided to start heading back, she heard by somebody that there was
Yeah.
that God had blessed his
They had
people
blessed the people.
back,
Uh-huh.
and that's why they started heading back.
Right, exactly.
Oh, that's
Okay.
so good.
All right, well, now we're gonna go back through the book again, but
Okay.
this time we're studying the characteristics of Ruth. We're concentrating on Ruth. So we'll just read chapter 1 like we did before. Yeah, we got time. And then you'll start from that point, and you can read 2, 3, and 4 when you get home, and look at the characteristics of Ruth. You're concentrating on what it is she's doing, how it is that she's reacting, because again, this is a love story, but there's no other love story that has its own book like Ruth does. And we know that Ruth, here she is, a Moabite, and we saw what all the Moabites did to the Israelites, and it was terrible.
Got it.
And yet, God set aside this book for us to see how he could even take a Moabite and bring her into the lineage of Jesus and King David.
My favorite.
Yeah, yeah.
She comes and proposes.
Mara, would you like to
Figure
read
that
some of
one out.
chapter 1?
No, I'm not comfortable reading out loud. Sorry.
Okay,
The
that's all right.
dyslexia is really not that fun.
Okay,
Reading
that's
out loud.
right. Catherine, would you like to read?
Sure. What translation are you guys in?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, every one of us
Oh,
has different translations, so you read from the
got
one you
Passion,
are
then you read
comfortable
out
with.
Passion.
Oh,
we
unfortunately, the Passion doesn't have the Old Testament in it yet.
Oh,
Yeah.
So I got the
Okay.
NLT on the phone.
What's up?
Okay,
All right.
go ahead.
In the days when the judges ruled in Israel, a severe famine came upon the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah left his home and went to live in the country of Moab, taking his wife and 2 sons with him. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife was Naomi. Their 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were, help me please,
Ephrathites.
from Bethlehem in the land of Judah. And when they reached Moab, they settled there. When Elimelech died and Naomi was left with her 2 sons, the 2 sons married Moabite women. One married a woman named
Orpah.
Orpah, and the other a woman named Ruth. About 10 years later, both Mahlon and Chilion died. This left Naomi alone, without her 2 sons or her husband.
Keep going.
Okay? Then Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had blessed his people in Judah by giving them good crops again. So Naomi and her daughter-in-law got ready to leave Moab to return to her homeland. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she set out from the place where she had been living, and they took the road that would lead them back to Judah. But on the way, Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back to your mother's homes, and may the Lord reward you for your kindness to your husbands and to me. May the Lord bless you with the security of another marriage." Then she kissed them goodbye, and they all broke down and wept. "No," they said, "we want to go with you to your people." But Naomi replied, "Why should you go on with me? Can I still give birth to another sons who could grow up to be your husbands? No, my daughters, return to your parents' homes, for I am too old to marry again. And even if it were possible, and I were to get married tonight and bear sons, then what? Would you wait for them to grow up and refuse to marry someone else? No, of course not, my daughters. Things are far more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord himself has raised his fist against me." And again they wept together, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, goodbye, but Ruth clung tightly to Naomi. "Look," Naomi said to her, "your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. You should do the same." But Ruth replied, "Don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything but death to separate us." When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she said nothing more. So the two of them continued on their journey. When they came to Bethlehem, the entire town was excited by their arrival. "Is it really Naomi?" they asked. "Don't call me Naomi," she responded. "Instead, call me Mara."
I see what you did there.
Yes. Right.
"For the Almighty has made life very bitter for me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me home empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has caused me to suffer and the Almighty has sent such tragedy upon me?" So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by her daughter-in-law Ruth, the young Moabite woman. They arrived in Bethlehem in late spring, at the beginning of the barley harvest.
Okay, so we've got Mara here.
Yeah.
Hi, Mara. How you doing?
My name means bitter.
I know. It's like, what were your parents thinking?
I really don't know.
And
You
okay.
could change your name to Naomi.
Yeah,
That's true.
but it's a pretty name anyway.
It is a beautiful name.
Yeah, and one time. Okay, so now I was going to go ahead and read chapter 2, but we'll just go with chapter 1. What are things that you see about Ruth? And I'm going to give you time on your notebook paper to write down things that you see about Ruth that stand out to you. So go ahead and take some time and just think it through.
Welcome.
I think everyone is just about finished now. So we'll go around the room and everybody will have an opportunity to say something that they notice about Ruth. Mara, you want to start?
Yeah, so the big takeaway as I was writing, it came to me was, so Ruth coming from Moab and having all those different faiths there and not the true faith, not her faith in our single God. When she's rejecting going back, she's rejecting those other gods. And she is not just clinging to Naomi for security out of just purely love, but she's also clinging to Naomi's God and clinging then to her own relationship with God. And the idea of clinging, just that word stood out to me so much. The rejection and the clinging, and what those two words mean, and how they're related, and how they're so different at the same time.
Okay.
So that was my big
Your big
takeaway.
takeaway.
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, obviously there were other things, but
Yes.
that was the part that I was
That's
like,
one.
oh yes.
Yes, okay. Debbie?
Totally. That's good. I agree with that. Well, okay, so we're dealing with chapter 1, right?
Yes.
So you got the two daughter-in-laws, and I don't know if it's a cultural or polite thing that both of them would say, oh, they cry, and they say, we'll stay with you, because they both did that. But then when she, it's, how people will say, oh, no, thank you. Oh, please. Oh, no, thank you. And
Yes.
so the one daughter-in-law is like, okay, I offered to go with her, and now I'll take her up on, I can see there's no husband for me. I want to stay. But Ruth, she can't be deterred, So and it's in the text because Naomi said she's determined to go with me after this whole long promise. I'm like, don't ask me to leave you. Where I'm going everywhere you're going, and even when you're buried, eventually I'm going to be buried in the same place. I'm not going to be separated, and I'm going to mention the name of the Lord in reference to that. So, the Lord do this to me if I don't mean what I say. And so she's also making a reference, like you were saying, to Naomi's God. And already, acknowledging that this is her God. So that was pretty cool. And then I know I'm not supposed to go on, but like at the beginning of chapter 2,
It's okay.
Ruth is the one I see, she's the one that suggests I'm going to go to Boaz's field and glean. You know what I mean? And maybe he'll find favor. So I get the feeling, and this is just me going on a limb, but that Naomi's got this wisdom because she knows to go back to the land after the husband and the sons are gone. She knows to go back to God's country. She knows that, God may have not been blessed the fact that they left, and that's where she belongs. And she's trying to do good things by her daughters-in-law to take care of them. But I feel like Ruth has got the same wisdom that Naomi does, because everything that they do ends up being like there's favor in it, there's wisdom in it, it's the right call. You know what I mean? So I think that they